Go ahead and start. Welcome everyone to the January 10th, 2019 meeting for the Board of Building Standards, Architectural Board of Review, and Sign Review. Mr. Secretary, would you like to do a roll call?
Certainly. Mr. Donaldson? Here. Ms. Haney?
Here.
Mr. Monet?
Here.
And Mr. Woodell?
Here.
We'll make a note that we have 4 members tonight. Mr. Robar completed his service last month at the end of the year. We'll be seating our new member in February. Brian Grambort, who is with us tonight, but will be seating next month, will be filling that seat as soon as his appointment by the mayor is complete and we have them all trained up. So we look forward to that, but tonight we have 4 voting members.
Awesome, thank you.
Be nice.
Yes. Did everyone have a chance to look over the minutes for the December 13th, 2018 meeting?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Any notes, changes?
No.
Me either, thank you. I will make a motion to approve the minutes. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Secretary, do you have opening remarks?
Certainly. Welcome to the Board of Building Standards, Architectural Board of Review, and Sign Review Board. The purpose of the Architectural Board of Review is to protect the value, appearance, and use of property when buildings and homes are constructed or altered. In approving building plans, the board will take into consideration the development of adjacent buildings and properties. Applicants and anyone else wishing to make a statement are asked to come to the podium, print and sign your name on the oath sheet, and slowly and clearly state your name and address for the record. When public comment is called for on each particular item, you can also come up and do the same if you wish to comment on the item. I would ask that everyone stay close to the microphone while you make your comments. We do record this meeting, and that's how we generate the minutes. So it's important that Johanna can hear you when she goes to do those minutes in a couple days. With that, we can begin the regular business of the Architectural Board of Review.
Thank you. Item 13 was summary approved at the pre-review meeting on January 3rd, 2019. A motion and a second will be needed for approval. So that is sign review docket number 010219 for 13337 Madison Avenue Revival Body Care. Make a motion to approve as was presented. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving to old business, items 5 and 6 are called together. Board of Building Standards docket number 09107-18B and sign review docket number 09107-18S for 14115 Detroit Avenue, Raising Cane's.
Hello, Drew Gatliff, Raising Cane's, Ohio. 1062 Ridge Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. So we are back in front of you today, speaking specifically about signage is what the last item that we were reviewing from last month, and we removed the sign from the drive-through over the pickup window. It's changes from last week or last month, and then I did get confirmation that we can reduce the size of the sign on the side to a 3x6 instead of a 4x8, as it was shown in the packet that was provided to you. So the sign there that you see on the west elevation can be reduced to a 3x6.
This isn't showing it reduced yet, though.
Correct.
That's the 4x6.
Correct. So that's the 4x8, so it would be reduced to a 3x6.
I think that would look better with the more space on the sides like it's showing in the front. That
Correct.
kind of tower is a little bit wider.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll center that window as well. On the tower.
Can you go back to the monument sign?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Can you explain all of the?
Yeah. So the monument sign here, we have the brick which would match the brick base, which would match the building. We would make that to match the Roman brick, which we've been using as our accent brick. So it would be the Roman brick base with a cast stone cap on top of that, which would then, which relates back to the building with a cast stone cap on top of the brick base on the building, and then the steel columns on either side of the sign. And then what this quick rendering shows, or quick model shows, is 2 horizontal supports, and it would in fact only be 1 horizontal support. And then where it's showing the white extruded color would actually be black, and there is a shroud that goes over, that connects that to that hides all of the guts. So it would be, you know, it's not going to be shown as 2 separate. It would be shown as 1 solid mass there. And then there were details provided as well, which the wall sign detail is the same as, yeah, if you want to go back to yep, that one. So the wall sign detail, it's the same sign. It's just attached to the horizontal metal member. So from a thickness standpoint, it's 6 inches for the total cabinet, including the fiberglass on the front side, and then about 4 to 6 inches between, and then another 6 inches on the opposite side.
And the whole face is lit on all of the signs?
Correct. So there's a fiberglass face. Yes, the
It's not
full,
just like the white parts, it's the whole.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Alice, can you go back to the east facade? So really, the only signage on this is the mural sign.
On the east facade, the only sign is, yes, correct.
Can we go again to the overage?
So just to get into some of the code references here, the building has a 50-foot frontage, and so by right, they're permitted 75 square feet of signage. Doing quick math, if we bring that 4 by 8 down to a 3 by 6, and we did this math in the pre-review, by reducing the size of that wall sign, and if we hold the mural out of our minds for a moment, that brings us down to just about the permitted size. And so really the variance that Keynes is asking for here is for the addition of the mural. That's really the additional square footage that they're looking for. With that 3 by 6, I think it's technically about a 270% variance. But again, that overage is that large mural sign.
They're under.
So that would be, if we excluded the mural from that, then we would have a total signage of 66.75 square feet of just the illuminated wall signs and the mural,
So you're
and
actually-
the monument sign.
Yeah, so you'd actually be under with the rest of the signage.
But we
it's just
understand the
yeah,
mural is a sign.
Okay. Yeah. The mural is- But I think that adds something nice to the facade. It's kind of Bruce's artwork
Yeah,
along with
it-
the signage.
we agree.
I think with the change on that, the western facade, that sign, I think that it all looks really nice. Actually. Is it submitted with the black shroud and the 1 horizontal support, or is what we have submitted showing right now? I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, I would make that a condition.
Okay.
That's what it's
Okay.
going to be, but
But it's
definitely
not
make that
submitted,
as a
okay.
condition so that everybody's aware.
Right.
Right. Mr. Secretary, did the city have any comments?
No, I think all our comments were addressed in pre-review. You know, overall, we were up against the total size, but I think that bringing the illuminated signage within that permitted, and then, you know, working out the add-on of the mural, I think we're in a good place here. I will note, just for the record, last month we approved the building and the site plan for this project. Last week, Planning Commission approved the conditional use for the drive-through and the other conditional uses that you needed. I believe this project will be in front of Board of Zoning Appeals next week for the front yard setback being greater than 5 feet. So all the pieces are coming together here.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this project? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment. I will make a motion to approve this as submitted with the following comments: that there is one horizontal support in the monument sign instead of two as submitted, and there is a black shroud surrounding the returns on the monument sign that connects both of the faces. Do I have a second?
And the 3x6 wall.
Oh, sorry,
3x6.
sorry, the 3x6 is not submitted that way either. The 3x6 sign on the west side instead of the 4x.
Second.
There we go. All in favor?
Aye. Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Drew. And that'll cover the sign approval and the approval of the variance.
Architectural Board of Review, item number 7, docket number 11-124-18 for 13919 Lake Avenue.
So the applicant has requested deferral to February on this. They're still trying to get a scaled site plan worked up for us.
I will make a motion to defer then. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Docket number 12-134-18 for 2091 Lakeland Avenue.
Some samples here too that you requested. Do you want to see these?
Yeah, bring them up, sure. Yes. We'll share.
Okay, Vince Monaschino, currently live at 1448 Robinwood, Lakewood.
Very good. Just give us a few updates, changes from last month, and we'll talk materials.
So last month, we came to the pre-review hearing. We discussed some earlier designs. There's some items that we reviewed. We deferred to the actual public hearing so we could address some of those comments from the board. So here we are with our revised design with some change details from that meeting. So just kind of a quick overview. It's fiber cement lap siding as the primary siding material. We have the shed roof up front with some columns, which I provided some detail for. We can talk about when we get to that. Some of the details, I guess, that are a little different that we've been talking about with this maybe versus some other things that we see in Lakewood is the lower elevation of the front porch and the railing, the omission of the railings because they're not required at that height. We changed a few details with the windows from the last meeting, added the divided lights, the simulated divided lights in the windows, went to a double hung on the porch, and the board and batten beneath the porch. So those are some of the changes from the original meeting. As we talked about, we're looking for something that's a little more modern than maybe the average or typical Lakewood house, but something that's still gonna fit in with the street and not completely stand out from everything else on the rest of the street. Just I guess the way I've been describing it as just maybe a little cleaner version of a typical Lakewood house, just deleting some of the typical trim locations and some other details like that. The porch roof will be standing seam, and the rest of the house and the garage will be asphalt shingles. So there weren't any zoning variances for either the garage or the house that we went after, so just trying to do everything and fit within all the requirements. So we brought some siding samples today. I brought some siding samples. The color palette we're looking at is a light gray on all the siding. The windows, which we provided a cut sheet for, are going to be an aluminum-clad Pella window, Pella wood window with black exterior. And then we want to, on the undersides of the soffits and eaves, we're going to use a fiber cement product that has a natural wood look. And the porch columns and the front door will be some areas where we tie that back in, and we're actually going to have a stained wood front door to pick up that wood tone, as well as the infills on the front porch columns. I think that's the example of what we're envisioning for the front porch column, where we'll infill that web of the steel with some natural wood with cedar to pick up that wood tone that we're using on the soffits.
Is the wood going to be facing the street or the steel?
You know, we've envisioned the steel facing the street because I think with a wood door, I think we want the wood to be a little more subtle, not right out front. So kind of be like honestly as it's shown in that photo. I think that's a kind of an overview of everything based on the meetings we had and kind of some detail, and discuss any questions.
I think when this first came to us, it was kind of trying to be two in between, like both styles.
Yep.
And when we're looking at, a newer house, this is really kind of rare that you get to infill a totally vacant lot on a really old street.
It's becoming more common in Lakewood.
It's becoming more common, you're right.
Yeah, we've got a pretty old housing stock
But
here.
it's still pretty rare, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to match every other house exactly, but when you're putting something new against something that's been there for 100 years, it's just the level of craftsmanship between how they built things 100 years ago and how we're building things now. It can slip if you don't pay attention to every little detail. But it's clear you have thought about every little detail, and you put a lot of thought into how you want it all to look. We're just trying to make sure that it's going to come across built as you are picturing it in your head right now.
Certainly.
I think the switch to the shed roof, the butt making out of metal, is a good move, and I like your ideas for the columns. It's something new, but also natural. Putting the wood in there is a really nice touch.
Okay.
How wide do you think those columns are going to be? I know we were talking about like 6 inches would probably look a little too small. We'd prefer to see 6. I think 8 will still work within the look that we're after and not look too heavy. We certainly don't want, with 4 of them on only a 25-foot width porch, we don't want it to be too busy and take away from the siding beyond and the rest of the detail behind it. But 6 to 8 inches isn't gonna, for us, if we prefer to see them a little lighter at the 6-inch size, but 8's not going to be a big issue for us. Just a lot of steel. I know, do you guys have a preference? I think that's great. I know, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we certainly understand that it's obviously, no matter what we do, it's going to certainly stand out on the street.
Yeah.
It is the newest house that's been built in 100
Right.
years. I currently live in a 1896 Queen Anne Victorian on Rodwin Lakewood. I've been there for 15 years, and at the other end of the street, there's a 1940s Craftsman, and there's a 50-year span in architecture and design just on pretty much any Lakewood street that you drive down. I think that's what's kind of makes Lakewood unique, and that you do see such a variety in housing. So while certainly we don't want to put some flat roof, super modern house in here, I think there's some room to modernize what we all come to kind of accept as the Lakewood house, you know, and that's all we're trying to do here.
Can we talk about the turn around the corner there?
Sure.
The two sidings coming
Mhm.
together. Alex, could you please go to one of the side elevations? That's fine. It shows both of them. I'm still personally worried about how that, the two sidings of vertical and horizontal are coming together. I know that you're talking about having an overhang in the front so you don't actually see it coming around.
Yeah.
I think a return or a trim piece there would still make it a
Right.
much cleaner line.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. You know, the one thing that was kind of important to us in this design is to have the mitered corner look on the lap siding. So that's intentionally why we held off any corner boards anywhere else in the house. We did show a little trim around the window. Originally, we had talked about no trim and returning the lap siding right to the window jambs at our December meeting. So since then, we did add some trim, which will be matched to the siding color, so it's not accented as much. I feel that if we add any kind of trim board to return on around the side, it's going to have that look of a corner board, and we're really trying to keep that as minimal as possible. So the batten strip would be, you know, a 3/4 piece of trim that would just project beyond the corner enough to return the siding into, and still have that kind of clean, minimal look that we're after. And that's one of the reasons why it's something that's kind of important to us. I feel like if, especially from this elevation, if we have that piece of trim that might wrap that corner for that to turn into, then the second floor where there isn't any sort of trim piece there, it's almost going to accent that more, that the two corner details don't match.
I mean, maybe all you simply have to do is just widen that batten up on the ends, you know, so it's a wider element.
That's what we're
Add it,
suggesting, yeah.
and coming into it this way, you know what I mean? So
That's exactly what we want to do. That's how we've
it's not
explained
just
it.
an inch and a half, and half of it's hanging over, so
Right.
you really only got
Yeah.
half of that
Yeah, I mean,
material on the
yeah.
face of the house.
The fiber cement siding is only 5/16, so it's such a low profile.
Yeah,
It's
it
not
is.
going to take much of an overhang on that batten strip to be able to give us an inside corner to return the
Yeah.
siding to.
I think I'm picturing it like too close and not having it be an overhang, so it's just gonna be this, not quite a line, like I think you have to go, like,
Yeah, if you could clarify for me, are we looking at it from the street and what you're envisioning, or at this elevation here?
at this elevation,
Okay.
or like on the corner,
Got it.
it's, I think you have to go a little bit farther than just the
The thickness of the
difference.
batten.
Right.
Yeah, I certainly understand it. I don't, in the end, where the siding returns into that trim piece, it's going to be the same condition as when it meets the back side of the batten. The only thing that's going to change is you're going to see a wider piece of trim there, which is what we're trying to avoid, because it's going to, in my opinion, have the appearance of a corner board.
It's going to be tight nailing. I'm just saying, to get the, to, you know, it's going here where we're, you know, hitting nail to go on an angle. and
Yeah, I mean,
just
this.
want it just big enough to make sure it's on there where it's not.
Yeah, it's a pretty
Catty.
Catty
common.
up is,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's a nice, clean, crisp.
So just,
Yeah.
yeah, keeping it small, certainly, but
Right.
big enough that it's going to be enough that it's not.
No, it won't be, yeah, I mean.
Got
it's-
something about
yeah.
where you're not having to rely on.
If you have a
liquid nail
longer
or anything.
overhang, you have that shadow to work with too. Like the
Yeah.
the shadow will kind of add that.
Right, but I mean, so
line.
even, you know, even when,
Yeah.
anywhere that we have a lap siding product like this, meeting a lighting block, or if you are using corner boards, you know, you're using a 5/4 material, even when you have a corner board, like, you're gonna have that shadow there. It always projects a little bit past, so you can caulk that siding into it. Frank, I feel like we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit. It's such a similar detail on, you know, on kind of what you're looking at and what we're after. They're gonna finish off the same way. It's just a question of if you're gonna see an inch and a half of trim there, or just the 3/4 projection of the batten strip.
No.
To improve you.
I like it.
Yeah, other than that, yeah.
Okay.
You did a really good job.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Secretary, did the city have more comments besides what we've touched on already?
No, I think you've really addressed a lot of our initial concerns, Vince. We always look for some elements to tie into the neighborhood and some elements to be modernized. I think that this is a nice balance of the two. We were initially kind of concerned about the height of the porch, but we've got that traditional porch form. We got the columns filled in, the shed roof, and the detailing, I think, will show through here. I think it's a nice job. We've come to a good product over a couple of months here.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this project? Hearing none, I'll close public comment. I will make a motion to approve as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Started.
Yeah.
To item 9, docket number 12-136-18, 1253 St. Charles Avenue.
Basically everything he just said. Frank Dockler, 1253 St. Charles, home address 8440 Cherry Hill in Broadview Heights. And I believe, I know you got some of the stuff, right?
Yes, I have some of that in the presentation, but if you'd share those material sheets with them.
Please note the picture on here
Mm-hmm.
is just to show contrast colors. We are not redoing the entire elevation to show that.
That's kind of nice there over there.
Probably another so we're not doing that. I believe at the last meeting, it was more of a clarification of the colors, the railing, and the elevation to show where these things were going. I believe that was it.
Got that, the beam example. One thing that I did, based on some discussion with your architect, was just sort of mark up this railing example. We were unsure last month whether the railing did get a bump out. The way that it's presented, it does not. It is a straight column. It's a
Correct.
stained wood column, 8 inches square, top to bottom. And then the railing system is the railing system that's presented, but it's black. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think a flat black, almost a cast iron.
So this elevation with the straight columns, railing, is more accurate than what we had seen
Yes.
before. Okay.
Yeah, currently, the number 7 up there, that scallop look is what's currently on the house, although very beat up. So when we replace the siding, we're going to just do the same thing, but same color as the rest of the house, so we don't make it too busy.
Good to me.
Yeah. Looks good.
Awesome. Thank you.
I don't have any comments. Secretary, do you have any comments from the city?
No, once we got the clarification, I did just want to unpack the stained wood columns. That's not something we see all the time. Appropriate
Yeah,
here.
but we have a metal roof on it too, so that kind of goes with the industrial look.
Okay, that makes sense.
It works.
I think it looks especially nice with the black, too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
I think if you had white, it would be a
Yes.
different story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, agreed.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this project? Hearing none, I'll close public comment. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Awesome, thank you.
Very good, thanks again.
Moving on to sign review, item 10, docket number 12-137-18 for 1450 Bell Avenue, Lakewood Child Care Center.
So once again, applicants requested deferral to the February meeting. They're working on an amended sign plan here.
I'll make a motion to defer. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. New business, items 11 and 12 will be called together for Architectural Board of Review. Docket number 01-01-19A for 15504 Madison Avenue. And docket number 01-0119-S, also for 15504 Madison Avenue, Closets by Design.
Good evening, Dan Kurzanek, owner of Closets by Design, looking to get a storefront awning for the frontage of the store. It is a 3/4-inch aluminum frame with a sunshade, color black, and a PMS code color 7503C, a gold for the logo and the type.
Do you have an overall photo of this building? Here we go.
Not wider than that.
Okay.
And we're looking at this bay.
I just wanted to point out that we were initially kind of taken aback by putting an awning on this building, but then we saw that it's the center awning and it's kind of centered in between, the center storefront is centered in between those entry pieces.
Yes.
And it'd actually be a kind of nice addition to that building. And the black awning looks good, and we were curious about the color too, so.
Okay.
thanks for pointing
I have
out
a
the gold.
sample if you need to see a sample or of the fabric color.
It's up there.
It's up, you got it, okay.
Is anything being done behind the awning to the storefront itself?
No, nothing's being done to the storefront itself.
Do you know if there's any transom behind there?
There is a small space behind there. It is not, like some of the storefronts to the left and right of me, there's an air conditioner space and there's a large empty space above it. There's nothing, there's very little, like a channel space. There's the wall thickness probably about 8 inches, I would say, above it. Because I was considering running electric, but with the floor, it's a cast concrete floor coming through the basement and on up, or trying to tap into the lights that are there, looked like it might cause a problem.
Are those lights staying too?
The lights stay, correct.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this? Close public comment. Mr. Secretary, does the city have any additional comments?
No, I think it looks good. Once we figured out it was on that center bay, it's a good idea.
All right, thank you for your time.
So I will make a motion to approve Closets by Design awning as submitted. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Old business, Architectural Board of Review, docket number 09-95-18 for 14519 Detroit Avenue, 1 Lakewood Place.
So just a bit of scene setting here. To review, we've been working on this project for a couple months so far. We are partially through the plan to development process as defined in our code. So in December, the Planning Commission issued their preliminary approval for this project, and that kicked us to the second step, which allows the Architectural Board of Review to proceed in reviewing everything in Chapter 115605. So the list of things that we're concerned with in this phase are as presented up here. Basically all architectural and site plan elements of this project. So what we'll get tonight from the Carnegie and RDL teams is an update on their progress, applying some architecture and some additional site planning to the southern residential half of the site. Taking this site in sort of 3 big chunks. We spent last month talking about the public plaza at the front. We'll spend some time in the future on the commercial, largely commercial elements in the middle. will be on the residential side of the site this evening. We'll not be seeking a vote other than to defer, but this is more information, progress, monthly development of this major project, but eventually moving toward your approval on these items. So, George, you'll kick us off?
Yeah.
Very good.
Sure. Thanks, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Members, good to see you again. Hello. Happy New Year to you. As Alex indicated, this is truly an evolution. So what you're going to see here tonight, I think, is a great step forward. It's certainly not a final step in any form or fashion, but it's one that is addressing primarily the southern half of the project. The commercial component, which Alex was referring to, is dealing right now. We're in the midst of some negotiations with one of our anchor tenants, so it kind of works well for us to get a good feeling for what their needs are before we're in a position to start talking to you about exactly what that will entail. And so without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to the RDL and the banking team that are here in mass, as you can see. And so we'll let them take the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Good evening. We're going to be fast friends in a couple months. How many friends do you? So.
Yeah.
Let's plug this in here. I'm Greg Soltis from RDL Architects in Shaker Heights. This is Terry White from RDL Architects in Shaker Heights. So the two of us are kind of tag team this evening. And then Marie's going to be up later to talk about landscape. So what you see here is we're going to have this as our first slide every month when we come to see you. It basically is the list that was just shown. The items in white will be things that we're talking about on the day that we're with you, and then hopefully 3 months from now we'll have all these things addressed and your approval. So tonight, this is the list of things we're going to talk about. So we're just going to quickly go over the architectural survey again. There we go. I got to be gentle with the
full screen view too, if you would.
Yeah, you know, which button do I press to do that? I always do views, full screen.
Full screen, 2 more.
There we go, okay. Oh, there we go. So then we're going to review the context again briefly, and then we're going to start talking about some of the residential units that we've designed, which are on the southern end of the site. So we have more information about the market study with regard to the residential units. Things are coming into place for the northern half of the site with more of the commercial tenants. And so we've been starting to work on concepts, and we'll show you that, probably the next time or the time after when we see you. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the site design elements in the landscape architecture. So again, just real briefly, we had shown you last time just what we were thinking about with regard to townhouses, variation in color, variation in detailing, instead of having just a flat facade that faces the sidewalk, having something that has some variation to it, and also making sure that the buildings always are having that conversation with the sidewalk and the public street. So in more of a traditional nature, then we looked at some transitional architecture and some more modern designs. And then the one thing when we were coming up with these designs, we looked a lot more closely at the single-family residential architecture in the neighborhood because we feel it's very important to be contextual and to respect that. So you can see on this board that not only is every house different, but there's a large variety of colors and architectural details that exist in the neighborhood. So when creating our color palette, our materials palette, it was very, very much informed by this. And the overall concept just for our color palette is really to have like an expanded palette of colors and materials that all the building types we design on the southern portion of the site can take from, instead of having, the liner units being one palette and then we go to the flats and it's another palette. So we're not having this dramatic transition, but something that feels more, fluid as it moves from north to south. So again, you saw this too. This was, so on the key to the right, the map, these are the orange liner units that flank the garage. And the one on the bottom lower left is at the sidewalk level. So you enter from the bottom of that plan there, and you can turn left and go down into the English basement unit, or you can turn right, go up a couple steps, and end up in a little vestibule, and then again make a decision to go left into one unit that's going to be about a half level above the sidewalk, or go up the steps into a two-story townhouse unit, which is on the right. You'll see when Terry starts talking about the elevations that there's some variety. So for example, on the upper floor unit bedroom level, the balcony is there in this plan. It may be a half of a balcony or a balcony on some units, so that we can start to simulate what happens in a more well-developed city over time, which is that layering as people make changes to things. So since we're creating this all at once, we want there to be differentiation between units, which can happen with color and materials, but can also happen with little details like that. And the other thing I just want to briefly discuss here, so Terry and I don't forget, as we progress from the northern to the southern portion of the site, from Detroit Avenue, which is very commercial and busy in nature, to the single-family homes at the southern end of the site, we go from 3 units in these brownstones, liner units, 2 units in the flats, stacked flats, which look like townhouses, and then at the actual townhouses at the lower end of the site, one dwelling unit per structure.
Just speaking to the architecture, part of the theme that we like to use throughout the entire property is ultimately to show great respect to the architectural fabric and color and texture and material. But a general thing we want to use moving forward is to speak to contrasting of materials. Typically, we want to show a lighter material in the foreground compared to the background, in essence speaking to the future of Lakewood and the future of this property. So more of a contemporary interpretation of some of the traditional forms. We do want to make gestures to, like in the gables, to some of the traditional forms and hit the essence of the single-family home with stoops and porches, and obviously we've included balconies. But in general, for the entire property, we'd like to see a sense that there's a brightness to this property, that we do use existing fabric and color, but we've brightened the foreground, and then the background gets a darker contrasting color or material. And we also wanted to have variation between each of the units, so where balconies occur may differ from unit to unit. And once again, we're trying to avoid just a standard monochromatic, regimented presentation of the units in honor of the beautiful fabric and the well-maintained neighborhood that surrounds the property. And in terms of some of the materials, which we'll get into very specifically later, in general, all of the foreground materials are brick. And then background on the first 2 levels is another contrasting color of brick. And we're using metal. And one other major element is the vertical portion of glazing on that foreground element to provide obviously lots of natural light into the unit, great view to the street from inside, and just add a contemporary element that will tie throughout the entire development.
Yeah, that layering that we're trying to create is accentuated by what Terry just mentioned, trying to use lighter materials on the towers that are closer to the sidewalk and using darker materials in the back. So, and this is more, probably the most contemporary and clean of all of them, as it's closest to the commercial development that'll be on Detroit. And then as we move into the next level, do you want to go through this plan?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely. So this has a very...
These are the tangerine color.
Absolutely, yes. The tangerine colored units just to the left and right of that upside down T-shaped building in the middle, which is apartment building. So addressing the sidewalk, you have a nice usable porch, provide some area for seating there, and proceeding into into the space, we have a bonus room down below that is a room that could be used almost as a multi-purpose type space. And it provides an opportunity with sliding doors there for that to open up onto the porch and kind of expand that space with some exterior space. Once again, more eyes on the street, more engagement with the community architecturally. And the garages are in the back, and we provide space for the trash. The trash is tucked in there.
Both units share the first floor?
So
Yes.
the idea was, like, instead of, you know, you have a party deck sometimes on the roof of your building? So to flip that and put it on the ground floor attached to the front porch. So you have friends over to watch the football game, maybe your apartment's filthy, and you just want to do it downstairs in the community room instead. A bonus room, whatever we call it.
And then underneath the stair, we have a space for a potential location for mechanical. So as you proceed up the stairs to the second level for Unit A, as you turn right into the door, you enter obviously a very open space that'll be flooded with light coming from the facade down below. This second level in this rendition is currently showing a balcony, but once again, this is where there'd be variation from unit to unit so that every unit's not the same. So with the balcony scenario, there's space for some seating, providing some very nice architectural detail, breaking down the three-dimensional facade and giving some nice relief. And then the dining area is in an alcove with expansive glazing, and that correlates with the large, tall rectangle of glazing that proceeds up the facade. And in the living room, if you proceed further back, obviously closets and the washer and dryer in an alcove and a very large bathroom. And this is a bedroom that has, on the back portion, will have a expansive glazing, also looking down to the interior street that we've created on the project with a very large walk-in closet. And then on the third floor, as you enter the unit, you enter near the bedroom area. And this floor offers the unique amenity of the potential for a second bedroom. It could be a den, it could be an office. And once again, proceeding to the front of the unit, we've eliminated the balcony in this scenario just to show variation, and that could become more usable square footage within the unit.
Did you want to?
Sure.
Yes, and just keep in mind, so this will vary also based on the individual changes to the unit. So ones that may have balconies at the top and some that may not.
And once again, as you see, the porch is in the different units that we have, sometimes there's a side entry going parallel to the facade. This is one that engages directly with the sidewalk and provides opportunity for a tree in the configuration of that porch to really help to dress up the street. And this, I think, does hopefully hit the theme of showing a light foreground portion of the building contrasted on a darker background, so that we show deference and respect to the existing architecture, but put a tradition or a contemporary spin on how we use those similar materials.
And then we've placed the plan down at the bottom so that, you know, it makes it easier to understand the elevation. But, you know, I've walked down the streets in Lakewood and seen people having dinner on their front porch or playing games. So, you know, these front porches are very deep. You know, you can put a table out there. You can actually do stuff out there. In addition to that, I think the way that the pop-out is arranged with that angle, you know, no matter which side you're walking, you know, which direction you're walking on the sidewalk, it's going to be a very interesting sort of experience to see. You know, one side you're going to see the steps that go up to the front porch. It feels very welcoming. On the other side, you're going to see all this glazing and the actual porches and balconies themselves. So we think it's going to be a very interesting addition to the sidewalk experience. And then this is, so these are the townhouse units that are down in yellow on the site plan. These units will be, some will be for sale, some may be for rent, but that you would rent the whole actual townhouse. So they do have front porches, and again, these are deep front porches that are actually usable. And then there's a bonus room at the bottom. So it could be a bonus room, it could be a bedroom. There's a full-on bathroom opportunity down on the first floor. So if you have a teenage kid or something, you know, that could be their room down there. So there's lots of options with that on the first floor. When you go up to the second floor, it's really one big kind of open living space so that the light flows from the front to the back. So you have glazing on the front and the back of the unit. And then you can see the kitchen up at the top there, a really long kitchen with a what are those called? Like a bar that you could have the sink in. So when you're washing dishes or cooking and your friends are over, you can actually look at them and talk to them. Your back's not to them. There's the entrance to the bathroom on this floor is kind of tucked away around the corner so that it's more private. And there's a desk there, but there could also be a pantry there or additional storage. And then the dining and living room kind of flow into each other. Also, when you go up the stairs, you arrive on that landing on the second floor, and the coat closet's right in front of you, so your guests come in, you hang up their coat. You go up to the third floor, and the washer and dryer unit are there. We placed the washer and dryer unit right in the hallway there, so it's, you know, more away from bedroom spaces. There's a linen closet there. The master bedroom has its own big walk-in closet and a large bathroom. And then the bedroom at the front is the smaller bedroom, and then the bathroom there is like off the hallway so that if you're having guests over and you're having dinner on the rooftop, someone needs to use the restroom, they don't have to go all the way down to the second floor. They can go down to the third floor and access that from the hall. And then...
So once again, as we've moved from the middle of the site down to the southernmost portion of the site, we're really starting to engage with the existing architecture and the single-family homes. As we made that progression, we've added more and more articulation as we move to the southern portion of the site. And it's at this point that we wanted to add the greatest level of articulation. So we get more detailing, we get stone or some type of smooth-faced masonry meeting the ground, as you proceed onto this very usable porch to the entry door. So there could be differentiation for their custom door. But once again, we're also utilizing, as aforementioned, the foreground contrast versus the background to keep a very bright aesthetic. And on top, there is a roof deck option. So we wanted to, once again, make a bit of a contemporary interpretation and a direct gesture towards the existing housing stock on that level.
Yes, you can see it's kind of open there.
So it's just
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so there would be some sort of cover there, but then the overall shape of the building still is more traditional in nature. And this particular, these are the three units that would be, you know, at the southernmost end of the site on Bell or Marlowe, and you can see how the one porch on the right, you know, wraps. So really that porch is speaking to Bell and or Marlowe, and also to the Paseo there that cuts through the block. So it's you know, the building itself acts as like a transitional element, and that one unit is pushed back further.
That open gable at the top, how deep do you see that gable being?
We don't know exactly yet,
Yeah,
but we kind of
But
see
it's
that it
not
would go
gonna-
back half maybe, and then the rest would be open. So you'd have, you know, some covered porch
Yeah.
or rooftop deck and some open. So even though, or we did want to start looking at the apartment building, and we started really laying it out. We have our unit mix, so we started to put that in here. This is the ground floor. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is that you'll see on the right and the left of the top portion of the building that flanks the garage, those units are separate on this level because of the entries to the garages, and they are also going to be architecturally treated much more in line with the units we just showed you that line Marlowe and line Bell. So they'll feel more like brownstones or townhouses in nature, right? And they'll have front porches and entries from the street. That same architecture will really wrap the whole base of the building and kind of serve as a base. And then there'll be, you know, a transition to a different type of, not completely different, but a transition to different architectural detailing that goes up for the midsection of the building, and then a crowning sort of element at the top where we have like the penthouse two-story units. So that's one feature that you can easily see on this plan. In addition to that, if you look at the center, the spine that goes from the top to the bottom, you can see all the main entry points. So from the garage, and we don't exactly know which levels people will be able to enter on. So once we line that up with the actual garage structure, we'll have, you know, noted on levels 1, 3, and 5 or whatever that you can enter into the apartment building. But either way, you'll be able to access stairways that go up to whatever level you can enter on. When you enter in the center there, you walk into, on this ground level, a lobby type space that will have mail, an Amazon locker, you know, some sort of open staircase that's kind of signature, the manager's office, and either maybe like an open seating area or a meeting room for the manager, and an elevator. The main entry point from a more pedestrian or people coming to visit the site that we see is really that area that says entrance. So what will happen is the paths on either side of there, that's one of those paseos that we're kind of creating that cuts through the site. The paths will gently lead up to an area that's flush with the first floor of the building, and that area will kind of be its own little plaza, for lack of a better word. And we see kind of extending the some sort of winged elements off of the pedestrian connection that's on levels 2 and 3, you know, over to also cover that, protect it from rain. So, you know, when you drive into the site, which you'll see when Marie shows you the site, from the left or the right, there are these kind of drop-off areas. So, and when we start to articulate this three-dimensionally, that entrance will be made very clear by the detailing that we use in the building. And then, you know, the circulation continues down through the center of the building, and at the southern end of the building, there's an additional entrance that is, you know, probably won't get as used as much of the rest of the entries will, but it allows for circulation all the way through, in and out of the building. These, on the second and third floors, you know, they're typical conditions with unit mixes. The other thing I would draw your attention to is the balconies. So we have a mix of 1 bedrooms, studios, and 2 and 3 bedrooms for the entire site. Most of those unit types are included in this building. And you'll see that there's bigger balconies and then smaller balconies, which will help create interest on the building when we start really looking at the elevations of things. And then on the 4th and 5th floor, the same thing happens, but you see that the building starts to step back. So the building is stepping back from both Bell and Marlowe, and then the interior of the site on the 5th floor is where we have the common room. And again, just to reiterate what we kind of pointed out with the massing model last time, is that we're using the vertical circulation elements of the stairwells to kind of create a visual barrier to the southern portion of the site and the single-family homes that are south of us. And then the room is north of that, and we'll have glazing on it that gives views. You know, you'll probably be able to see downtown from here. You'll probably have nice views from up here. And then at the top, 6th floor and 7th floor, so, you know, that space in the middle is really going to be probably more void space, more glazing all the way up the building that really will break the massing of the building up into what will feel like 2 towers. And then these penthouse units at the top will kind of create these crowning sort of capital elements at the top of the building. And, you know, you'll enter on the 6th floor into your unit, and then there'll be vertical circulation internal to the unit that gets you up to the 7th floor. And we'll have terraces, you know, we're showing them there, you know, every other, and the intention there is so that everybody has privacy. So whether your terrace faces north or south, it's just opposite of your neighbors, so you have privacy. And we'll articulate that more as we continue to work on the architecture of the facade of the building. This is like if you took Bell Avenue and you did a street section right down the middle of the street. We wanted you to get an idea of how everything is starting to work together. So you can see the dark outline building to the very left is the building that we don't like, right? And yeah, and I was told that last week or last time. And so then in the middle is the is, you know, the tower that will be office and condos. And so the scaling starts to go down. Then there's the liner units that are in front of the garage. And you can see, you know, in between the massings of the buildings, the points of circulation where people can cut through the block. And then we have some of the existing houses all the way to the south of the site. So you can see even with those three houses there that the colors and materials that we've used, you know, they work with the houses that are on the street. And we've started to try to break things down and make things much more in scale to what our neighbors are to the south. And then we did just want to real briefly cover how our design thinking is working for the front of the site. So what we've done is we've thought about, our initial thoughts about the massing at the northern end of the site work in two ways. This first way that I'm going to discuss with you is really thinking about use. So, you know, in the bright red there is the retail portion of the site. And so in thinking about the architecture for that, some of our design intent is to maintain this transparency and connection between the interior retail spaces and the plaza and the sidewalks, right? So there's this activity that can be felt on either side. We generate activity on the sidewalks, keeping eyes on the street. The other thing is when we start thinking about materials, we'll be thinking about human-scaled materials as people are going to be down there up against the building. Also thinking about repetition of elements. So repetition can be used to move people down a sidewalk, across a facade, and then interrupting that repetition with ceremonial-type gateway entries into various different retail spaces and, of course, the winter garden. So, you know, we've collected an assortment of images. We've just put a couple here that show some of those things: transparency, activation of ground floor spaces, repetition of elements. Then in thinking about the winter garden, we of course want this to be very transparent. I mean, transparent to some degree in the way where the plaza feels like it just flows into the winter garden and vice versa. So glass, so that in the daytime you can see right into the winter garden. In the nighttime, it's going to be glowing and kind of like a beacon that calls people to there. That image at the top of the slide, we like that one because, you know, the element at the top that kind of pushes out and then the stairs at the bottom start to create like this embrace that kind of beckons people into the space. So, and then the element or the image on the lower left, we started thinking about, besides the fact that we'd like to have greenery and plants that kind of are in the space that relate out into the plaza, but how can the structure somehow start to mimic more natural elements? And then for the top, we have the commercial transitioning into the condo. And what we started to think about there is how do you express two different uses on the exterior of the building, not just because you want to do that because, oh, we want to tell the world there's an office on floors, you know, 4 through 7 and condos above that, but really because how people use space and how people interact with the space outside the building requires different types of glazing, you know, terraces, balconies, things like that. So these are some examples of where the architecture has transitioned in a vertical nature that we really like.
One other comment about this tower, as we start to look at the apartment building, which becomes the largest mass on the, you know, southernmost portion of the site, we really have to start looking at the aesthetics of these towers together, so that there is some commonality that connects them. So that's why we don't have all the apartment building information now. We really need to get into that moving forward.
Yeah, right, because at the top of, well, even from the top of the office floors, you'll be able to look across the parking garage and see the apartment building on the other side. And then the other thing we're thinking about is really more from like a massing perspective, and that is the verticality of what you can see, the darker red, blue, and yellow. And then in the lighter blue is where the entrance to the winter garden is. But starting to think about this as one element. So how does this rise from the street? How does it become a focal point, something that is a pleasant addition to Lakewood's skyline, but also something that really is fun to look at and engage with from Detroit Avenue, and as something that rises up above the plaza.
So as we, once again, getting to materials, majority of the materials won't be uncommon to the area. We would show great respect to what's there, but use it in a very clean, contemporary way. So at the ground, we would meet the ground often with brick or with some type of stone. And at the porch, in some instances, the railings may very well be in the top right-hand corner, and the image beneath that, like a stainless steel wire mesh that is getting more use in our area. But it provides a good amount of transparency, but also some sheen and a little bit of reflectance off of that face. And we'd also use a metal panel or siding as we further up on the buildings. And the roofs typically we're showing as standing seam metal roof. And then the color palette will be pretty diverse as depicted in the top left. That's just a small sampling of some of the colors that we propose.
Okay, and so we're going to turn it over to Marie to discuss landscaping and the site, further development of the site plan. Her renderings are beautiful.
Hello again. I am Marie Dowling with Benke Associates in Cleveland, Ohio. Vehicular access. Well, first let's talk about what the site currently has, and this is just a look at what the streetscapes currently are around the site. This is the Curtis Block. This is the Cleveland Clinic, Marlowe, and this is Bell. You currently have about a 5-foot walk on both of these streets, and actually our site is just down from these pictures. So starting to look, outside of these buildings, that what we think of as the fun stuff within a site. How does everything else function outside of the buildings themselves? And how the street functions, and how does it work with this plaza that we showed you last time. So we want to start looking at each of these pieces, and we're going to try to walk through it piece by piece. So the first one we're going to talk about is within this residential portion down in here, more of the enclosed area. And just to make it clear, we intend that the residents are going to come in from either this side, from Bell or Marlowe, and they're going to function around this site, or they're going to turn and go straight into the garage where they'll have their own garage spaces. So in these sections, and the upper section shows this little bit of a brick node that we see within the corners of the residential space. So we do have these walks that cut through this space, and so we have a mix here of where we have cars coming into their garages, we have folks coming into their houses. It's a little bit of a different space where you have folks on this side, that's basically their front door. Folks on this side, that's their garage. So we have a real mix of what's happening within this space, and then trying to merge those uses and what's going on there. So on this side, you'll have the patio from the folks that are along this edge. We want to see some type of specialty walk, possibly a brick paver, and then you'll have the concrete pavement, which you see in these edges here, where we see the cars coming through. And then vegetation. We want to keep as much vegetation as we can in front of these units as possible. So we're kind of jumping a little bit on this one, and just to explain where this next section comes from. It comes from this upper drive that cuts through the space. So we see people that drive to use the larger building here, that they're going to come into this space, and that's how they're going to access the garage. It's how they're going to have their drop-off, and this is where the garbage is going to go. And the restaurant entrances will be in this back area. The winter garden, which Greg has spoken about in length, would come in that entrance. So in this section, we're basically looking at what this drop-off is, and we're trying to create an area here without curbs, easy to use. Perhaps this becomes the valet, depending on the use of whatever this space becomes within the larger building. Perhaps it's grocery pickup or something to that effect. That's not set yet, so I don't want to lock anything in. Valet also may occur in this space. We want to keep everything flush along this edge, which is what you're seeing here. So this is basically along this northern edge, keeping a bollard break between cars and where people are walking. But then on the southern edge, also having a secondary walk. So people coming from all the residential streets have the ability to walk through, and it creates another way for folks to cut through this site and access this site. But then the feature that we're adding in this space is also we're trying to screen this garage. This garage is being excellently screened on both sides because of the liner units. We're trying to create a vegetation screen along that south edge as well. So streetscape improvements, and we're going to talk about Marlowe and Bell. We'll start on Marlowe. So Marlowe in this section currently is actually very similar to what you see within this. It already has the tree grades. It has about a 5-foot walk. In this section, we basically keep the curb where it is. It doesn't change much. And then as we transition even further south, we're trying to basically meld this area with the current residential, which we looked at in that picture. So then we go from a section which is basically a hardscape, possibly some decorative pavement like brick and a walk. We're going then to a walk with a tree lawn. Just so everyone knows, this line right here is the right-of-way line. So then we start talking about the Bell side, and actually the liner units is very similar. The thing that changes slightly is that it does move the existing curb over to allow some street parking along that edge. But then, and very similar as well on the lower section as well on the townhouse section. So very similar here. We're trying to meld to a existing walk, which happens down in the residential. So this feels like it belongs here, like it isn't something that we magically plopped. But obviously, it's a little bit different. And as you get further north, the walk is going to get wider. And I say wider because this brick is still walkable, even though we are putting a tree within it. So people can pass each other. It's possible to walk along that edge. But we do want to get some larger trees also within that section to green up this space as much as possible. The city in general, most homes have at least a larger tree within their front yard. So we're trying to do something very similar here as well. So urban open space. So now we're talking about that southern walkway. In the initial thoughts, I think you've seen everything, which was very straight, just basically connecting the two spaces. But to us, this can really be kind of like a park walkway. This is really something that melds these houses to the existing residents and the fabric that's going on here. We are able, when we're able to push out the walk, it does appear that we will be able to not have a wall within those spaces. That the wall would only occur where we are a little bit closer to the property line. And the nice thing about this is it kind of goes with the backyards of those existing residences. So we felt that with that and some really good evergreen vegetation screen, these folks still have their backyard. These folks have a front door that basically looks out on a park. So we felt it was very much a win-win for both. So the residential space, this is the apartment building. Looking at what happens here, because you have the apartment office entrance here. So this is another one of the walkways that cuts through the site. We want people to have the ability to drive in, but people also the ability to walk in safely, cross these spaces in an area where it's very clear that this is the walkway. So the pavement here, you know, serves in two ways. It tells people, hey, this is not only the place I'm driving through, but it's also a place where people are walking through, that people live. You know, the hope is it starts to slow people down as they're coming into those spaces. So again, we have the walkway. The section here is section F. So we have the patio space above along the northern edge, and then we have the walk that cuts through on both sides, trying to get in, again, as much vegetation as we can or as makes sense within the site. So then in the same area, we see these areas becoming somewhat of a gathering spot for residents. Area where it's possible to possibly put some tables and chairs, where it's possible for the interaction of the existing residents on their patio with those folks. But also you would have some green space that screens you from the street or alleyway that's cutting through that site. So just to talk about some of the existing streets that we looked at within the city. 3 of these are within the city of Lakewood. This is Ridgewood looking south, so this is close to 117th. It was just looking at how a newer residential development handled parking. They did bump-in parking. They did heavy screening along the edge or front of their house. This is a street down, I believe it's Winchester. And to us, this walk felt a little bit narrow. We're looking at a wider walk in front of these homes. This is the Mckinley Place development, and this is basically their alley space. And we see something very similar possible to happen. The top slide is in Washington, and it's a slide of something that we can see can make this place special. What's different for us is right now we're proposing possibly a brick or specialty pavement within this zone. But we certainly see that we can green up and soften the area along the building. You know, we're just going to go through some of the possible, you know, what it's possible for this project to be built from. This is Flats East Bank. So this is one of the bricks we're looking at, pervious brick along that edge. Western Reserve Historical Society. It's a mix of what we're showing currently within the alley space of the residential, where it's possible to have a mix of a lot of different pavements and still able to flow. There's no curb in this space. There's a transition though between here and the front door, and it feels safe when you're walking within this space and the cars are still dropping off. We haven't buttoned down any site furnishings yet, but these are some of the ones that we're looking at. These are the bike racks. We're also looking at some bollards. You know, we're just trying to get a feel of where the city feels about some of these items. We like, for the most part, to carry these through the site. I think that's important that these elements, for the most part, carry through, and it looks like one development. Some more pictures of different benches possible, leaning bench, which is becoming more common. Apparently, we move so fast. We don't want benches anymore. We just want to lean on something. So that seems to be more common. Trash, and then some different lighting options. You know, looking at all gamuts, whether it's historical, whether it's very modern, whether it's incorporated within the site design. We do want to add trees to the edges of our, as we were showing the liner units and the townhouses. So we see the opportunity for things like tree grates to be a big part of the site, but not be boring. Be something fun. Be something different. Trees. You know, we're not going to go into every species of tree. I think what we're trying to show right now is that it's possible. This is Prospector elm within this one, and this is a college campus. These are about 10 years old. And the nice thing is, it feels like an old elm street. I wasn't around when elms dominated the streets, but I've seen pictures after pictures of it, and it's starting to feel pretty neat. So something like this, I think, could be really special for this site. Different possibilities: Russian sage, different grasses. Evergreens, colorful mixes of ornamental trees and different trees, you know, with different colors of vegetation for fall color. All of these are going to be part of this site. I think it's very important to have it as part of the site. And Greg's going to wrap us up.
So this is basically back where we started. Hopefully by April, all of that will be white and you will say approved. So, you know, we welcome any questions, comments, anything you need clarified at this point.
Amy, with so many things.
Oh my God.
I might recommend, let's go building by building on the architecture, maybe starting with the apartment liner units. Let's have some dialogue about that. Move to the walk-up units, dialogue about that, townhome units, dialogue, and then we'll go to the open space and have some dialogue, maybe to help frame our discussion.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a lot of information. I was not expecting all of this from, I think it was just last month that we saw you, right?
You guys didn't have any holiday break, right?
Yeah.
We can't judge.
Stay right in the office. Our family came to us.
All right.
I tried to jot down some notes, but one thing that kept coming up in my notes is you've talked some about having variations, and there's not going to be a balcony on every building, and there can be kind of changes that people can make, or options they can take or not take. But everything is reading right now is very symmetrical. The plan is perfectly symmetrical. This, even though there's two, yeah, it's mirrored more. I mean, it's not playful and random at all. And like you're saying, the words that there's going to be options, and everything's not going to be the same. But even on the landscape plan, there's two green spaces on each side of the residential tower, and they're both exactly the same. So I think when you have to take more chances and get more variety into this. We started off with the brownstone precedents.
Mm-hmm.
They're all almost exactly the same, but they're different colors, and they all have that bay windows, and like the only
You're talking about this one.
Right. There's something about each one that's just slightly different, but somehow this is more of a fabric building, I think. So this is all, reading as one building, but it has all these juts out that are separate. But the building that you're proposing now, the liner units, it's like in between.
I think the analogy is you want it to look more like a quilt.
Yeah.
And right now, it's reading like a comforter. So the question is, how can we make it in such a way that it has some of the diversity of what you've emulated earlier on in the conversation? Likewise, with the overall elevation, it would be great if we could just see them all together. I mean, right now, we're seeing that plus what's on the other side of Detroit, that seeing the blend from one building stock to the next, there seems to be, they seem to be fighting for attention right now. Right now, we look at this seems to be a mirrored plan. You see it copied on the next iteration. You see the other iteration, once again, is copied, and then there's a little differentiation. But at the same time, when you look at them going from one to the next, I think if we could see maybe the street plan that you had, Alex, or, oh, I'm sorry, you're driving. Yeah, that one, it just, it almost looks like you have a San Francisco style house on the far right side, something that's a little more modern. You have something that is in between that and then is trying to remedy that at the end. So it's a question of, it just seems like there's a lot that they're fighting for.
I think that your points are all valid and well taken and noted. And I think that, again, with the limited time over Christmas break, we've gotten really far.
Yeah, agreed.
But, you know, there are some things, like even when you look at the liner units, for example, you know, we started to vary the roof lines, right? So we can maybe do a little bit more variation.
I think on this one, you might not, it might be more successful to go with more of a fabric building, that they might be all
So you're
exactly
saying go
the
one
same.
way or the other?
Yeah, I think each of these buildings is trying to be kind of in between.
Right.
But maybe that's not the right choice for this one.
I
And
think-
you differentiate with the colors like the brownstones do in Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, especially this one, it feels like, yeah, maybe doing this one as a little more uniform. I also, we have a lot of materials. I like
Right.
the transition of the dark and the light, and I think that works, but I think, how many bricks are on this one specifically? Like, there's
Well, we did discuss the
two
fact,
brick.
right,
If they got maybe a little closer, just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Right.
Variation good,
Right.
but not
Yeah.
all
Right.
the variation.
You know, matter of fact, that's kind of where we started, where there was a little bit less variation. It was a bit more subtle. And then we jumped to this scenario, kind of thinking about the housing stock. So, you know, we'll see as we move forward how it fleshes out either way.
I think to your point there, that it doesn't have to be that each unit reads as its own unique piece, that there could be blends between the two units, so there's a nice transition, thereby reducing the amount of materials that you're using on this block. So it starts to look more cohesive and not as, right now, it just feels very haphazard right now. There's a lot of things that are competing for your attention in this little block.
And I think, you know, the success of the variety of materials in the houses, they're separate, and there's space between them all. They're not all.
Right.
You know, and here, they're all together, and it needs to,
That's one thing that we did discuss, is like you're taking things that are on single-family houses and compressing them
Right.
into one space. And as Terry mentioned, we have a more simplified version that we started with. One of the benefits of this is, you know, starting to think about what colors and materials and combinations you do like. So this is kind of like a buffet, if you will, for you.
we'll talk food.
I think
No,
so.
right?
If we're talking specifically about the liner units,
Yeah.
I think that you want them to be almost exactly the same plan and repetitive all the way down, and do slight variations in the colors of the bricks, like similar to those brownstones that we saw. That the haphazard thing is not going to really work as well on this building as it does in others.
Okay.
Amy, I would tend to agree with that. For the things that I like, just to throw a nod your way, the material palette is there, in my opinion. A lot of masonry, even the metal paneling. You're seeing stone, not as much as on this building, but on some others. But to me, it's simplifying the shapes, massing, and color palette, specifically on this elevation. And I think even playing with how even those roof lines are interacting with each other. Right now, there's just a lot of different lines and shapes. I'm wondering if even there's just a simpler, cleaner touch. The beautiful thing about the brownstones that you showed is they pick up their interest through very small, subtle, but very well-detailed portions of the building. So like the cornices even change as you go through different parts of the building. Or the bay windows will all kind of pop out the same way, but maybe the sill's a little bit different. Things like that. I think you can really do well here, just to kind of focus on the smaller details. And what makes a lot of the single-family homes up and down this street so great is they are so different, but it's subtly different by house, right? So you've nailed the front porch piece. You've got the materials pulled in. I think it's just simplifying the bigger components of the design, at least in my view, guys. That's kind of how I feel about this side.
Great. And then I just had one question.
Sure.
Is that a glass rail in front of, like, where the steps go down?
No, that's that stainless steel metal, so it's translucent, so you see through it, and the stainless steel, so there is some reflectivity and reflection that would occur there to kind of hold more to a contemporary presentation.
I'm wondering if I would like a wall better there. I mean, and it's kind of like that little courtyard,
Yes.
more like a courtyard than a porch, because
Yes.
that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
a courtyard, not a
Oh,
porch.
so you're saying at the ground plane?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
ground,
the-
yeah.
Okay.
And at the English basement, the
Yeah.
one thing we want to be careful of is making sure that we don't impede the amount of light that we'd like to receive down in that space. That's all the light that they're going to get, so we want to be as bright as possible in that location. We thought about a wall earlier, but we didn't want to make it too dark down there.
Those are all facing east and west, though, right? So they're already going to be blocked out from most of the sun anyway, because it's coming from the south.
Yeah, for half the day.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we don't want
Yeah.
to limit it
yeah.
even more, so.
I don't know.
The other note, too, I want to make caution on is you're stressing contemporary being offset against the contextual fabric of the neighborhood. When you look at the contemporary, be cautious about that and look at it through the lens of what's going to be good 5 years, 10 years, what's going to be viable for the community, what's going to be viable for the project. Then also goes to the site planning and the site furniture. Don't get something that's of the zeitgeist right now. Get something that's going to have some permanence moving forward. So as you start to look at the geometries, really vet it, think about it through the lens of, are you going to be pleased with this within 5 years? Is the community going to be happy with this in 5 years? Are you going to look back on this or regret it? So trying to be your own critic as you look at this, and also extending that to Marie as well.
Did you have notes on this, Amy?
I did.
I thought you did.
But I think it goes back to what Bryce said, is it's a lot of materials. I think you can narrow them. Even though, I mean, I think that you're fine with the same color window trim on everyone instead of some red or blue that goes on everyone. Yeah, but not when everything else is so formal. Like,
I understand.
yeah. It makes sense if that's worked into the vocabulary, but this is a very, like, formal design, and that just seems random then at that point. It's the only
It's
random
poking
thing.
out, grabbing your attention again.
Yeah.
Once again, grabbing your attention.
Okay, so basically same sort of general comments, although this doesn't have to necessarily feel as much of a unified, what was the word used, like a filler building or whatever?
Right.
Like a fabric.
Right, as the other one. These can maybe be a little bit more individual, not necessarily in doing like 500 colors.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, just simple recommendation. I mean, I just wonder what it would look like to go to 2 bricks on this and have those run all the way up the units and maybe have these bump outs, these bay windows or the bigger bump outs changed to help delineate and how that would change just the profile.
And you can provide some variation in plans too, like some of these might want 2-story spaces in it, and then in that, where you have the glass on the edge, you have a big double window.
And a matter of fact, that's
Yeah.
not depicted yet in there, so that
But it's
variation would
intended.
definitely occur to where there could be glazing on the first floor and it's a balcony above that.
Right, I think that would
Or
help a
vice
lot.
versa, so, well taken. Don't hold back. Jump right on there.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to my comment about putting all these 3 elevations against one another in streetscape and really studying them because each one speaks a little bit differently. And right now, they're struggling to be all part of the same family. Like the detail work around the door right off the bats and the detail work around the window, all that's contextual. It's really how does that then start to blend in with what you're doing? Because you're building of a different era. So how do you start to take those little details and maybe play around with it so it becomes simpler, a little bit more refined, and then you start to introduce it back into the rest of the concept. But yeah, it just, once again, materials goes back to what Bryce has already said, simplifying that. And then by simplifying it, that's when you can actually punch up a few of the little subtle details that makes it unique.
Sure.
Where did you want to go next?
Whatever's next.
Roll through.
Yeah, we could probably go to the landscape plan and work through some
Well,
of that stuff.
could we go back to that for a second? I just have a question that might influence the architecture. You talked about common room on the 7th floor, and there's just a little mail room here on the 1st floor.
So the 5th floor
Right.
has the common room, yeah.
Fifth floor, yeah.
And yeah, the 1st floor has mail, Amazon locker, lobby.
They're gonna need a giant Amazon locker. Is there a leasing office? Is there some kind of a
This-
common? Is
so-
there something like public that kind of shows its face at all for this
Well,
building? Or is
this-
it all these just residential units?
No, this right here, so this is like the manager's office with a room. So this kind of functions like the meeting office space right here.
But to your point, does it feel like you're trespassing
Yeah,
before you actually get into the building?
yeah. Is it? It's underneath that bridge, right? Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I said when we get into the 3-dimension, like more into 3-dimension. So what does it feel like when you're in that circle that Marie showed, like that red circle? You get out of the car, you're walking down the path, and you see, this massing here, and this bridge going over. So we need to explore, like architecturally, how do we make that feel very welcoming, like an
Right.
entry? So really, it's not like that's the entry, but really the entry is when I'm actually approaching that outside area, right?
And one thing that hasn't yet been fully depicted, that center area will be mostly glass. So very transparent, and that glass would run up the building. So it gives some separation between either side, so it's maybe a bit more welcoming and transparent in that location.
Something as a wayfinding kind of point that here's our building front, even though it feels like you're in a neighborhood.
And then I think Mike Malinsky said this last time, just about the symmetry of the whole site, and talked about the possibility of maybe moving your bridge over to one side so you have a bigger green space to do something with. If you don't do that, could maybe both of those green spaces be different and have different programming in there? Like you have a little area that you can take your dog out, like a tiny little dog park on one side, and the other for the humans. And is one hardscape and the other one is softer. Just everything is, if you're on this side of the building, you get the exact same thing as the other side. I don't know, you can kind of work in more variations through the whole site.
There was like a thinking that we did with those two spaces on the side, and that was when you think about how people move through space, like those natural desire lines are created. So we tried to think about that beforehand. And so really that kind of, that swoop. Am I missing it? Oh, no, there it is. So this swoop was intended to be like imagining someone walking this way, right? Or if they walked, if they were walking this way, they would just go like that. So then using that path as a separator between a hardscaped area that can be like a little mini plaza for anybody, but residents, to gather in, and then using that swoop as a defining element that transitions from hardscape to softscape.
Yeah, and plus I think the final use is probably going to be different from side to side. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. So yeah, I think that's something we certainly need to look at further.
I think you want to program it. You have to figure out what you want to happen in each of those spaces and make it happen. I mean, people are going to walk how they're going to walk through it, but you can tell people how they're going to use the space based on what you provide. So
certainly. Okay.
I think that would be something that would could inform the whole site. I mean, there's no variation in the types. I note that this is not final yet, but it looks like in front of these apartments you have this type of tree, and in front of these apartments you have this type of tree. And there's no reason you can't mix it up. And,
certainly.
Different bricks, and I mean you have brick paving in front of one section, but maybe even though it's symmetrical on the other side, you don't necessarily need the exact same thing. I think having a little more fun and being more random will help, at least in this area, in this plan, this site design.
Okay.
Did you want me to just go through slides and then as you...
my brain's gone. I know.
I can start...
Go to the overall. There was the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at this one for a minute.
I have a quick question while these guys are thinking. So the decision to as you're moving south on the site, we've got the sidewalks kind of do a swap. So you got the sidewalk closer to the buildings, I think, at the liner units, and then it flips as we get to the walk-up units?
Yeah, so at the liner units, the sidewalk is really just much wider, right? So there's, in the amenity strip where the trees are would have like pavers, and then there's the sidewalk. So it's designed to handle more traffic. It's that transition as you're approaching the commercial section, right? And there's like our trees in tree grades. And then we kind of wanted to keep the sidewalk aligned. So there's very little jog, but as you get down in front of the townhouses and flats, that sidewalk continues so people can get, we have that parking, so people can get out of their car onto the sidewalk, and we start to create little front yards, if you will.
Sure.
So we're making that transition to, what are much bigger front yards as you get down into the single-family neighborhood. So that was the thinking behind that. Instead of having one continuous type of sidewalk all the way down, and then having this abrupt transition to tree lawns, and 5-foot wide sidewalks.
And plus, we felt this is more common to what you see further down on Bell and Marlowe, is to have a tree lawn in front of the house.
Right, so section C will match south of you.
Correct. And
Sidewalk south of you.
the walk essentially aligns with the existing walk of.
Then you break at the curb cut just north of C on this left-hand side, and then it jogs a little bit. Yeah.
But not much.
Okay.
So you're still going to kind of feel that continuity of the sidewalk.
Got it.
I think what we were confused earlier was we were reading that 5-foot amenity strip in B as a tree lawn, and it's mostly pavers and pits.
Yeah, it's all pavers and
Yeah,
pits.
I got you.
So it functions more like a...
It's an extra walk.
Yeah.
I got you.
But it's trying to give that tree a maximum zone to grow as well.
Mhm.
It's
That
giving
makes
it
sense.
as much chance as we possibly can.
What is the parking situation as we kind of transition south into the neighborhood? What is it existing now? Are they parking east or west on Bell and Marlowe? I'm just thinking, because we have, the inset parking, looks like we're cutting into the sidewalk, and then just wondering how that transitions to what's existing on, who's parking on which side. And since they're going to be farther out, then we're moving it in.
So currently, there's no parking on the street during the day. There's only parking at night, I believe, is what we saw the signs to be. And obviously, there's a chain or a fence up all on this
Right,
side, so there's no parking currently. But we are trying to match what's going on now and giving folks an opportunity to get off of the road and park, because there's a lot of streets within the city where you have to wait and let the car go by. But with the amount of use you're going to see coming to this site, we didn't want that to happen. We wanted it to make sense where folks park, where there's no question. So we definitely wanted to bump this in along the southern, and plus it gives them a chance to have guests to park there, and possibly the residents will, stop and drop something off as well to maximize that. But I don't know if it's going to change eventually once the hospital is officially gone, that they'll be able to park further down along here, but I assume that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's a nice move. Just wondering how that related then, kind of coming down. So
on this side,
that's
it does
understanding,
move the curb slightly along that edge to make this all function.
Mm-hmm.
We were always trying to make the transition feel natural and fluid.
And still to keep the right-of-way then basically at the back of the walk, which is what feels most normal along this edge. And obviously then it moves to the tree lawn along that section.
Yeah, so where the parking is where the parking is like here, so as we go further down south, that's where everybody's tree lawns are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, are they parking then on the other side, the rest of the street? Or were they parking on both sides? On
The hospital
Marlowe.
said at contact, because the hospital was there, everyone parked on this side of the block. And there were meters there.
Yeah, so Marlowe, as you transition south past this project, it flips to the east, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the parking goes to the east side of the street.
So it's even better that the cars are tucked in.
Yeah.
And on Bell, I think the parking currently is on this side, isn't it, Bryce?
Bell, I believe, is on the east side as well.
Okay.
Restricted during the day.
Right. That's more continuous, but then it's flipping.
Just a quick observation with the overall plan. I know we looked at the figure ground diagram, and there was a relationship of how much area is being developed versus what's on the hospital site. This has a lot of pavement on it. I'm just going to throw it out there as an observation that there's not a lot of grass. I know we talked about permeable pavers, trying to take care of that for stormwater best practices, but there's nothing really on site to take care of that. Just, it's a very hard site, all in all.
I had the same comment.
It would be nicer if
Noted.
it was softer.
Some of that you could do with the parking too. You can have tree lawns come out on the other side of the sidewalk in some
Right.
places and not provide just a whole line of parking. Then you can have kind of a double line of trees
Right, and
in front instead of
We do have
Just
some,
that.
we do have some plans where we show those breaks in the parking.
Yeah.
So, and we've discussed that.
Yeah, maybe that makes sense too, where you have the walks cutting through, that would happen.
Right. But yeah, it just feels very hard right now.
Yeah, like
And
Amy
I
said.
think it might be how it's presented.
The two nodes on the side of the T shape there, like they're so hard. It'd be great to have some green, more lawn, essentially, right?
Yeah, our challenge really becomes, we still got to get trash trucks and everything else through here. We initially were trying to put some trees and to get some green in these circles along these edges, and engineer keeps pushing back and telling us, hey, we have to be able to get these things through. So yeah, that's a challenge right now.
We're working on that. And then the other thing is we brought up the concept of a winarc for this back street. So So once we develop this further, there will be even small opportunities that have a big effect to introduce, you know, more greenery, even like those little bump outs you can see in between the garages. You know, that Tom was planning on maybe putting like small evergreens there, like little evergreen bushes. So we will soften it up.
Yeah.
We do also though want to find a good balance between the urban nature of Lakewood and not just putting lawns everywhere just to have a lawn, because then they just die or they get desire lines through them as people just walk through them. So we will be thoughtful about that as we develop this further. Should I just keep going slide by slide?
Sure.
That's the alley street that cuts through.
Yeah, I start to like this a lot more when I first saw what was happening here. I was afraid that was gonna become this, you know, dark alley.
Right.
You know, just this horrible kind of space that people don't want to live in.
And it can't be, because a large number of people are going to access
Right.
the commercial portion of the site from
Yes.
here.
Good point.
It needs to be a space and not just an alley.
Right, especially like this, you know, not having a curb here and
Yeah.
having this drop-off area and having the pavement change in some way there.
Lighting will be super important in this.
It certainly will.
Yeah, I think that goes for the part in the south part of the site too, that pedestrian cut through. Pedestrian style lighting
Yeah.
that when it's 8 o'clock at night or even right now outside and it's the middle of winter, that you still feel welcome going through there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's going to be people's bedrooms only like 6 feet away, so.
Right.
They have really nice
Isn't that-
fixtures now, though, that
Yeah.
angle the light right onto the side.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I wish there were more of them in Cleveland, but
Yeah.
I feel like if I walk in the street, I'm fine, but if I walk on the sidewalk, I can get mugged. So we talked about that.
I got these.
Talked about that. So this is the big paseo. Look at all that greenery, Rob.
Will there be a fence between the two properties?
It's gonna be mounded up. We haven't suggested a fence. We talked about.
Does there
one.
have to be? Or because is it multifamily and single family that you need a fence?
The code answer is it allows for landscaping or fence to be installed. In this scenario, I think we'd like the neighbors to just figure out what makes the most sense for both parties.
Because in some ways, it's nice to have access to this nice pathway, get it easier to the commercial area, but yeah, at the same time, you're exposing your backyard.
Right.
So I'm sure the neighbors might say when they come up, hi. Yeah.
But just as a visual, guys, I mean, that helps a ton, just on how that edge is gonna be treated. So thanks for putting that together. I think you did a nice job at least proposing the landscaping on that south edge too. It's
How wide is
strong.
that sidewalk?
6 feet minimum.
I don't know if it needs to be that wide and you can get back more green space too, or if it's not 6 for the whole thing, you know,
But we wanted
it
to
comes
make,
in and out.
we wanted to make sure that people who were like passing each other, you know, when the sidewalk's not wide enough, which happens a lot, that you have to kind of actually step off the sidewalk to let someone pass. So we wanted, especially this particular paseo, potentially, because it also functions in a way like a mini street for the units that face it. And 6 feet is a good minimum to let 2 people pass each other comfortably.
Yeah.
Feels like this would be a nice stretch for kids to be like rollerblading or little bikes on. It's a little more protected. It's away from the other more car circulated area, but still kind of a private park type. Yeah, I think the 6 is needed.
Is the apartment going to be raised in all cases?
Yes.
So it's up.
So, yeah, so this brings that entry up to that level. But then it also, so having it raised like that creates that patio condition.
Yeah, yeah. I think we already touched on all my notes on this one.
I was gonna say, if there's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah, next one.
No?
pressing to get to, I think it's probably a good time to transition to the public.
Okay. I had one note or question on the commercial side. Are you designing all of the storefronts, or are you leaving that up to retailers? Is RDL or the developer going to be designing all of the retail storefronts and retailers would fit into it? Or are retailers going to be designing or having input on the design of the storefront?
It's a function of who's going to end up being the first tenant into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's a commercial tenant, if it's an office tenant, we're going to need to build an entire structure and make some assumptions about how we're going to enclose it and create the envelope. Probably in a form or fashion that we hope will be adaptable, but if it's a retailer, we'll probably design the retail component to fit them. So, I mean, it's all a function of how we're going to handle our leasing. Ideally, we want to be in a position where we can address what the retailer needs will be.
So Amy, on the expectations for the plan development approval, if the tenants are lining up, we're going to present that. But the individual storefronts would be approved in concept by ABR as a part of the PD, and then as tenants sign leases, from that point moving forward for the rest of time, they'll come back to ABR for storefront approval, for signage approval. It'll essentially operate just like every other building in the city. So for the little smaller storefronts, those would come back to you. We'll work hard to get, here's the concept that we're thinking of, but know that every business may want a different style of system or signage, stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Now would be a good time to open. Thank you.
Thank you.
Might want to stay. I don't know. Do we want to
We'll
go through
take down the notes again
Take down all
and-
notes and go afterwards?
Yeah, because then we can page
Yep.
through
Gotcha.
diagrams in response.
Anyone want to go first?
Sign in later. Jesse Shedden, 1488 Marlowe. A bunch of comments here and try and kind of lump them together. But, a lot of the stuff that the board has discussed as well as far as the liner units and making the flow a little, I would call it the flow of it a little better. And even, I would say, there's a lot of, with the way it's set up now, it looks like a lot of skinny, which they are skinny units, but doing something to make them look a little wider and kind of match the width of, even though the unit themselves might not match the width of the existing homes, like grouping multiple together to try and give it that better look, or the different groupings as well on that. Really like the front porches on everything, being bigger, being big enough to use, things like that. But also seeing a lot of, I would say, straight lines, and straight lines in the sense of being squared off instead of, even if it's straight lines, more of some angles, things like that, just to kind of help the look compared to the rest of the street.
Jesse,
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit more.
So actually, if we look at the, okay?
Maybe hit the arrows. There
So
you
if
go.
you go, if you look at the first, it was way up at the top, I think, the brownstone inspiration here. So if you look at this middle bottom to where it's, it's a straight line, but it's not square. It's not just a square, and it's more of the angled in and then. So more of that look in some spaces instead of straight out, straight over. I think would, yeah. Yeah, so more of that style, I think, would help match to the existing. And then, you know, a lot of the materials we're seeing and are what I would classify, and I totally understand, is more of the low maintenance style, like the metal roofs, the stainless steel on the porches. But I think that's going to instantly set it apart from the rest of the neighborhood. And you know, a lot of us have the front porches have it's a lot of wood. It's a lot of, you know, it's obviously the roof would be different than that, but it's just one more thing to kind of set it apart from the neighborhood. If we're trying to integrate better, we'd want to match the neighborhood in that sense. And then the other piece is really looking and seeing a rendering of the southern units that are going to have the setback to them. So the ones, the three, they'll be connected, but each one will be a little further back, and how that's going to flow. And is it just going to be a flat wall where they're not lined up exactly, or really just kind of getting an idea of what that's going to look like? And then from a landscaping perspective, really liked a lot of what we saw that. I just, you know, a couple questions from that is, at what maturity level is all this going to be planted? So, you know, saw some pictures, some trees are about 10 years old, but are they going to all start at 3 feet high and then we're just going to be waiting? Or basically what the maturity level will be? And then you mentioned at the southern border not necessarily having to do the retaining wall. Just curious, more of it, sort of a little there is the elevation change, how that's really going to be handled over how much of the elevation is going to drop, how much will be dug out, and then how many feet will the slope be or retaining wall, just kind of that detail. Wanted to see that on there. Yeah. All right, thanks.
Hi, Ben Hockenhall, 1492 Marlowe. The comment made by a member of the Architectural Review Board about the character of regret really sort of resonated with me as I was looking at all of this. I'd expected to see designs that were closer to the brownstone inspiration rather than the more modern inspirations that were shown later. I'd actually taken the most modern inspirations to be more cautionary than aspirational, and I was disappointed to see that I was wrong about that. The gentleman who presented the design, I believe that was you, for Lakewood, was it? I think demonstrated a really good sense of what it looks like to integrate a more modern aesthetic with a neighborhood so that you have something that is more modern and more innovative and yet respects the character of the neighborhood. And so I'd suggest that maybe you could take a couple of cues from that. The liner unit design in particular seemed very aggressively modern, very angular. And the thing that's really kind of struck me was that it didn't seem to recommend itself to the community much. It reminded me a lot of the cookie cutter kind of construction you see in other condo developments. And so it managed to be both somewhat aesthetically offensive and boring at the same time, which is an interesting mix. The middle townhouse units, same kind of an issue. They don't seem to integrate well with the residences literally on the other side of the street on Marlowe. Again, very imposing and really kind of imposing their character upon the neighborhood rather than trying to integrate with the neighborhood. And the southernmost townhomes, I think, were the ones I had the most issue with. In some ways, they almost seem to be baring their teeth to the rest of the neighborhood. I don't know why I feel that. Maybe it was the really pointy kind of angular structures at the top. The rooftop decks that were on those, I object to that idea. I thought we'd established in earlier meetings that having rooftop decks overlooking the rest of the neighborhood was something that we objected to and something that everyone clearly understood was not really a desirable thing from the neighborhood perspective. And I'll reiterate my ongoing concerns about mass and scale. The scale drawing that we saw earlier did demonstrate that a lot of the structures are much taller than they had appeared in previous drawings. I just want us to continue to pay attention to those questions of overall height and proportion. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, I really like the deep front porches, particularly that they would fit a table. I think that that's an excellent integration into the neighborhood, and I really like that. And the fact that you added pillars on the porches of the townhomes, I think was a really nice addition as it gets closer to that south side.
Sorry, I want to write down your name.
Oh, sorry, Nicole Shadin.
Thank you.
Yeah, our sign-in sheet's not here. Okay. I'll start with the landscape streetscape. First, I'm sure this is in the minds of somebody, but I want to make sure that the privacy landscaping isn't something that's going to get out of control in 5 or 10 or 15 years, like the way some arborvitae can, and it's just huge and it's impeding our neighbors 2 down that are going to get demolished. He's very good about trimming back his arborvitae, but it's still encroaching upon his driveway a little bit. So, just a thought there. Again, the streetscape, if this is going to be metered street parking at all, we need to keep that in mind. I like the wide sidewalks, but if we're adding meters as well, that cuts off, at least a solid foot of usable sidewalk space, so something to keep in mind. The lighting would do well to match the new black traffic lights that the city has put in. I think that would make this entire development look and feel like it belongs to the city and in the city. I know we've spent a lot of money on putting those in. They look really nice. It'd be a good way to just mix it with all of Lakewood, or make it match with all of Lakewood, rather. More landscape, streetscape. I'm wondering, to Jesse's question on a different element, wondering how you'll handle the elevation difference between the last house on Marlowe and the Paseo when it comes to the sidewalk, because that could be a pretty aggressive slant in the sidewalk downward to get, or up. To be determined, but where the elevation difference between the front of Marlowe, where it matches this property, and then the front of Bell, we've talked about is really different. So the sidewalk consideration, when we talk about having lots of people, having lots of traffic, having a really aggressive angle in that sidewalk is just not something that we want to have. So last thing, lands and streetscape. Just the ownership of the Paseo landscaping and the cleanliness. I know I take care of my sidewalk, but you guys mentioned that some of the units are owned and some are rented, so I just want to be clear. It is a really nice walkway that everyone in the city is kind of clear on who owns taking care of that, landscaping included. So, okay, on to the linear units. Jesse kind of mentioned this, but matching the neighborhood width rather than emphasizing the narrowness of each unit, and maybe it's that it's a recess and then a bump, recess, so, not so much just, I'm sure you know what I mean. Okay. The glass balconies on the front of the linear units really don't fit the neighborhood at all. And also, even though I don't face that, I would be concerned with so much glass. And there are a lot of windows, which I'm sure is nice for the people in that, but even, just the addition of that patio glass, I think is just a lot of reflection for those neighbors. Amy mentioned this too, a different spin on it. The linear units, could resemble, we've got this brownstone inspiration, but some of the more classic apartment buildings on Clifton and Lake, those do exist in our city, so it would fit to put something like that here rather than making them all those very individual looking units. That's last on linear. The townhome units I think would match much more nicely with the neighborhood without that second and third story balcony. It would take those away and it looks like much closer to kind of a normal single family house, but having those, the little bedroom balcony, well, the one bedroom balcony and the other kind of dining room balcony, really I think sets them apart. These are very different. This is a different look, different feel. So just a thought there. And then the last thing, retail. We talked about this at the very end, but for the retail space, I just want to make sure that the design isn't such that we say in 5 or 10 years when somebody moves out, oh, that obviously used to be whatever, because it matches their look in where they are in Rocky River and where they are in Westlake and where they are in Avon. So we need to keep some, Lakewood reins on what the designer's doing for the retail, so that when things change, it's, it fits. There's room for retail movement instead of, oh, look at that building. It obviously used to be a Target. Now it's big and empty. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all we had? Anyone else? Thank you. You guys want to come back up? I'm trying to mark what was just a comment and what was just a question, and try to hit some questions.
Okay.
I think that the first question that was brought up by Jesse, we didn't hit on it, maybe it's not designed yet, but the setback units, the wall that faces south, is that going to be just a solid wall, or you're going to design that with windows?
And actually, we have that porches that'll wrap around that area, so you continue the filling of more of almost like the front portion of the house, and with glazing on that side too.
And there'll be windows on that side too. Yeah.
And then the maturity level of what is being planted. We typically require at least 3-inch caliper when you plant, but is there going to be a variation of some more mature plants going around the whole development, so it all kind of looks in together and they're not all growing the same height?
Oh, certainly. You certainly want to mix it up, because you don't want everything the exact same height. Actually, I'd probably prefer not to go in all at 3-inch, possibly a little bit less, because those trees actually grow faster than the larger trees. The nicer thing about the larger trees, though, is they screen better. So the larger trees we'd probably use in the screening areas where we want an instant bang. So that's where we'd probably focus the money for those at.
Piggybacking on that question, while we're on planting, who will be responsible for all of the upkeep of all of the landscaping, specifically in the Paseo and
Paseo right
where?
now is scheduled to be for sale units. As a result of that, we are probably going to be looking at creating an association, if you will, a condo association that's going to be responsible for all of those common areas, maintaining it. So that's no different than any other planned development that has a series of common areas and responsibilities that are associated with it.
So would that technically be part of the condo association to the property line, or like?
To the property line.
Okay, so across the other side of the sidewalk too,
Yeah.
so all of the
That
edge
would be
landscaping.
That's their designated area.
What about for the rest of the site
Well,
where
as
there's?
you get into the rental units, and we're still going through, and that's going to be a function of how the ownership is all structured, but the rental units would have their own maintenance obligations associated with keeping the apartments viable. And then, of course, you're going to have the retail component, which would be common area maintenance fees that are typically associated with triple net leases. And then, of course, the office component, which has their base year expense that's associated with us charging their pro rata share of what those common area expenses are as well. So each phase of the project, from the front along Detroit, the commercial components to the residential components as we go further south, each will have their responsibilities in connection with all the common areas and maintaining.
This is a question more for the city. What happens in the right-of-way? Is that all going to be maintained by the development or by the city?
The short answer is by the developer or the owner of the property, which is the status all throughout the city. The maintenance, just like it is in front of your house in your tree lawn, is the same as it is on our commercial corridors and up and down Marlow and Bell.
What about for the question was brought up about streetlights? those would be within the right-of-way, but they'll be installed by the developer, but is there a possibility that they could be the same system and owned and operated by the city, or is it all going to be part of the development as well?
Yeah, well, one, I love the recommendation about pulling in the elements of the traffic signal poles. That's a great idea. I have to see how we did Arthur, which was a partnership with the owners on that street. That's where we've got the decorative street lighting in the tree lawns. So I don't know what the structure is there. I mean, frankly, we're going to be open to whatever makes sense, whatever makes the most sense, especially with the lighting stuff.
And Bella and Marlowe, it makes total sense to have that be the same fixtures.
Yeah. Maybe even extending an idea that came up all the way up to Franklin.
Right.
Yeah. And that's something that we're going to start working on too. Not owned by the individual owners. Okay. Thanks, Brian.
So elevation detailing on the south side, how the elevation changes between the development and going south, and then also between Bell and Marlowe. Have you looked at how steep of a grade that is going to be and how it's
I think by
transitioning?
code, the sidewalks are going to have to be only, where there's going to be a maximum amount of slope that are allowed by code, right?
2% cross.
2%
slope
cross,
maximum.
yeah.
Right, so
Right.
ADA sets that.
Yeah, and then as we get surveys and civil more involved, we'll have more details about.
It'll be gradually along the whole site and not just like you get to the end and then there's a hill.
Right. Like right
Gotcha.
now on either side, they slope up, and then the house is higher than the sidewalk, and then the backyards are higher. And that's gonna we're gonna work with that that's there.
Question was brought up about, or a comment about rooftop decks. Had there previously been any sort of discussion about whether or not there's, you could be on a rooftop deck on the south side and see into somebody's backyard, if there's going to be like a view corridor from any of those on the south side on the rooftop decks? Or are they on like a side of a unit that you wouldn't really get it?
Well, the ones that face the Paseo, it's currently, the rooftop decks are oriented north. There is an opening there that we could close off. And so that really, from the rooftop decks, you won't be able to look into any backyards. You'll only be able to look into the internal portion of the site. So that's something that can be accommodated. And the rooftop decks are not necessarily, we're schematic.
Right. But I assume that you can position them so that they wouldn't be just right on the edge and looking at.
Yeah, in fact, and in this image, you can see the little bit of the roof. So even that second portion is like pushed back some to begin with.
Will there be parking meters along this street, or is that all?
To be determined. So I don't know yet. But that's a deliverable on the city to come up with the public parking plan on both Bell and Marlowe. So that'll be a deliverable that we'll work on together.
We hit everything else that I had except for one about, and I actually had the same question. That was kind of my last question about the retailers is, will there be kind of a design guidelines for the retailers here that the retailers would have to follow, and not necessarily just have free reign? Or like, we've done that similarly with like signage guidelines for a building. I don't know if there's like an architectural sign or design guidelines that might apply here to this development.
I think we'll do it for both signage and for retail storefronts. Probably defined by things like materials, lighting, rhythm, massing, things like that. I don't see it that much different than even, as an example, maybe the way the INA building plays out. So how some of those storefront systems changed over time. We went to the nano wall system after open up those storefronts. So I think just allowing the retailers, especially food-based restaurant owners, to be able to open up storefronts is like one of the most important things to us, is just being nimble through that. But I would say signage and storefront will develop guidelines to follow.
I think that makes sense here. Such a,
And might add, obviously, with the sensitivity and integration, what we're doing above the office in that elevation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a resolution of forces, and, you know, with the way integration of the materials that are going to be up above, a sensitivity and compatibility to that. I mean, you just can't completely forget about, you know, half the tube would be diverted. So that's
Yeah,
really, that's the only ethical.
George, I would say we could have, you guys should inform us on what makes the most sense on that stuff. I mean, I think we're certainly open to what those are, and but just kind of thinking ABR 10 years from now, having some sort of guidelines to follow when a new tenant comes in, I think is what we'll have to.
We could try to do that in most of our projects. We end up identifying criteria that is part of the package that the tenant has to comply with.
Okay. Got it.
I don't have any more.
I think that covered the questions, other than,
Yeah.
the comments that I'm sure you guys heard, and took note of.
right, if you,
We noted,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
simplifying color, you know, potentially, Nicole and Jesse said about maybe making those units feel maybe more like duplexes or something to make them match the width of the houses. Simplify, and then pay attention, we can do different things with like the little details. Basically soften the liner building, kind of maybe feeling more like potentially those apartment buildings you mentioned, or maybe more true like the brownstone images we've shown. Lighting to match the new black traffic lights. Maybe losing some of the balconies on some of the townhouses because they're not necessarily in keeping with the nature of the residential units. And I like make sure the retail doesn't look like it used to be a. So yeah, we took a bunch of notes, and Marie took a bunch of notes as well.
thank you. I think I'm tapped out.
That was my goal for tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary or Director Sylvester, do you have any more comments for tonight?
No, I think we've covered it well.
Guys, great job. Seriously. I mean, the amount of work you've done in a month is great. Please take these comments as constructive feedback. We will work very hard over the next month, 2 months to bring back some updates. But you continue to be on the right path. So very well done. Very well done.
One thing I would add is make sure we get a copy of that presentation so we can put it to the web tomorrow.
Okay, will do.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Real quick, Amy, just for the neighbors that are here tonight, we are going to be scheduling a community meeting, a community workshop on Wednesday, January 30th. Wednesday, January 30th in the evening. We don't have the time or place set yet, but just so you guys, because you're here, to talk specifically about the public space design, programming, and to spend a lot more time with the community about what we want that space to be. So again, Wednesday, January 30th, somewhere outside of City Hall is where we'll be, and we plan to do a bunch of outreach on it, so I'm sure you'll see it. But if you guys want to flag your calendars for that to be there, that'd be great.
Thank you. For One Lakewood Place tonight, then I'm going to make a motion to defer. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And right now, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.